So I want to turn to your practice as a writer. What does it look like from from notion to finished product? How would you describe your practice? How do the poems come? How does the work come if it's not a poem? Like, what would you, if you had to distill it to a Malika practice looks like?
Oh my God. So one, for years I don't write alone. I've written in community. So I've written with groups who we put up prompts and we work together and we send each other the drafts of the poems. In closed groups on Facebook, there's a group for several years. Every time there was a 30 day month, we would go, anybody wanted up for doing 30, we need 7 people to prompt, and people would put up the prompts. And what that means is that if I'm working on a particular project, the prompt is going to force me to go outside of my comfort zone, or because I'm still going to be trying to meet the demands of the project that I'm working on, the theme I'm working on, but this prompt that this person puts up might challenge me or get something different. It means that I'm also always, when I've been doing that, I've been also always in the practice of writing. And then also I practice a lot of reading as well. So I will try and read, sometimes I'll try and read a poetry book collection a day. And so that means I wake up in the morning and read the poetry collection before I do anything else. And that way, for some reason, when I'm able to do that, and that's not maintainable sometimes, it's not sustainable. When I'm able to do that, I'm able to write easier. When I don't read, I'm not able to write. So if I haven't read for a long time, I find it difficult to write. And then sometimes it's quickly responding to a prompt and then going back to it. Sometimes it's going, I have writing buddies or writing buddy, and sometimes we'll call each other and say, right, we're going to do, when we lived in the same city, we'd go writing together. We'd go to the poetry library in the South Bank in London, and we would just sit down and be like, okay, I'm going to be working on this, I'm going to be working on this. We're there for 4 hours or something like that. There were times when I was writing with the South Bank in the evening. I would go down there with 2 writers. I think Morrison was one of my writing buddies at one case, and we would meet up at the South Bank, and we would write in the evening. We would just say, oh, I'm working on this project, we're going to write. And it's just the idea of another body writing helped. And then, yeah, I think those things have helped. And then there's the getting up, going to the desk, and then setting timers, working against timers because I get easily distracted. So I work with timers. And the poems all depend on what's happening. Some poems, they're there and it's just really to be whittled through. I'm in several master classes where I bring poems to get feedback. So I get feedback from peers around poems, and I trust them, and they're vicious and they're hardcore because we've been doing it for a long time. And I've got mentors who kind of look at the poem and they're like, no, you're taking the easy way out and stuff like that. So that always helps. And, I've got cohorts who we discuss poetry, we talk about poetry. I mean, you and I have been mentors from overseas, and it's not that we write together, but it's just like, oh, okay, over this week we're going to read a certain amount of books because our life is busy, and just making a commitment to someone enables us to be able to do it. And yeah, in some poems, I know what's happening, and some poems, I'm trying to figure out what on earth you want to be. And some poems, I think it's nice, but then when I put it against everything else, it's just a draft, and it just helped me. And sometimes I go to my desk to try out things, to just go, I'm not writing today, I don't feel like writing, so maybe I'll try to compose some sonnets, just as an experimental space, so the desk can become an experimental space sometimes as well. I hope that answers your question.
It does. Tell me a little bit about publishing too, though, because is that like an end goal that when you're writing, or at what point do you start thinking about, or do you start at some point thinking about where you want the work to land eventually?
No. What I do is, and that might be my problem. What happens is, like friends of mine go, you've got enough work. Like, you've got work. I would be there thinking, how do I need to gather this work? And I have a false insecurity about the amount of work that I have. When I do think, okay, I'm starting to work towards publication, what I start to do is polish the poems and send them to places. So a lot of times people ask me for poems and I don't have poems for them. I have a lot of drafts. So that means I'm on my way to to thinking about publication in that way, because I'm sending them out, and if they're being accepted in places, because you know, as a poet, you know, rejection is more than acceptance. Then I'm starting to, you know, I'm like, okay, those are ready, those are fine. So I mostly, I think that's the way. I'll tell you after the next book is published.